right, we are back live in downtown Las Vegas, and it's our last hour of the show, and we're very excited to join by this gentleman in studio. Not only is he a professional bettor, but he's just an all-around good guy. Ron Marmalefsky. And Ron, that was the first time that I even knew your last name until today. I've known you, of course, Ron Ace, at Ron Ace X on social media. That's where you can find him. First of all, how's the week been for you? I know after spending an entire week in Vegas, you can be on fumes, but you certainly look like you're holding up okay.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to sit here, meet you in person, and be a part of it. Football in the background, it's so excited about that. Draining is the word I come with. I mean, it's exhausting when you're here so long in Las Vegas. You're running around, you're doing different things. You did not turn the air conditioning on outside for me.
No, you don't need that.
But it's been good. I mean, it's always a good experience to connect and reconnect with people here. Had lunch with Las Vegas Chris just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and we're excited to get back with Chris. I know you guys do a podcast series in the off season together, and probably still will continue it during the regular season as well. It's all about process, right? And I think that's the most important thing that I wanted to stress, because we get Ron for pretty much the entire hour here, and we get to pick his brain about all things NFL. And I'm sure most of you are thinking, oh, what's his best bet for the regular season? Yeah, that's cool, but you're going to have a million people on your Twitter timelines giving you best bets for the next 6 months. We don't get a chance to really dive into process too often. We're in a very quick pick culture. So let's start at the beginning. The Super Bowl takes place. You're done with the season. At what point do you start to reopen the books and kind of post-mortem what happened and maybe looking forward? Do you give yourself time? Is it important to take a step away before getting into the new season? What is that process like right after the Super Bowl for you?
Yeah, it is important to take some time away, and the NFL is making it harder and harder because they're stretching, the combines here and the schedule is there and stuff like that. You're thinking of it in the back of your mind. The self-autopsy is the only thing I'm really working on until the combine starts. And then when the combine comes, I want to match up team needs to what I'm seeing out of the combine, because I have specific things that I'm looking for. Speed is important at one position, turning radius, how you move your hips and stuff. You wouldn't think the combine is all that essential, but there are some things that I can pick up. And the other work that I'm doing between then and free agency is just getting a handle on the new coaches. What's it going to mean? Tennessee has a new defensive coordinator. He says he's going to play more press man. I raise my hands and say, finally, it's those kinds of little nuggets that I'm looking for. I'm looking for random tidbits, random turnover ratios from teams. I'm just gathering some facts at that point, not really writing, which I think for all new handicappers, try out writing. Try out verbalizing things, so that you know what your conviction is. That's part of the process. And you're right, process is the most important thing you have.
Yeah, and I'm similar. Usually after the Super Bowl, so my birthday is the February 28th. Usually it's right after, 2 weeks after the Super Bowl. Although, if we keep going on the schedule, my birthday might be on the Super Bowl pretty soon. But usually I take that time and I don't even consider anything NFL related until after my birthday. And that it's just that's just like an arbitrary date that I just set for myself. It might, vary by a few days, but I do think that space is important because you're so usually heated at the end of the season if you've won or if you've lost. And it's important to kind of cool down and then reassess. At what point do you start prodding the market for things? I know we're getting numbers earlier and earlier. We know the Super Bowl numbers before this Super Bowl is even played for the following year. But usually around April or May, that's when the schedule drops and the win totals and those things. At what point do you start poking the market and say, okay, I want to grab this and I'm looking at this and or is that kind of an ongoing process throughout the summer, or is there a date?
It's a partially ongoing process, but the start of free agency is the trigger. So you're looking at roughly mid-March, the start of free agency. I do take a couple of days to cross sport and watch March Madness. The first 2 days are fun. And then after that, that's it. Now I'm thinking, how do I get ahead of the curve? The numbers are coming out earlier. I've already made some preconceived ideas about coaches. I've looked at the stat sheet. I've seen the trajectory. I know my performance on these teams. I put my preliminary needs out. And the first day of free agency is a whirlwind, 12:01 a.m. Everybody's already signing people in that so-called period that you're not supposed to sign people, but they're all signed
legal
and ready
tampering
to go.
period, which is an oxymoron in itself.
Absolutely. So I would say within 4 days of free agency, I've already formed some preconceived opinions, and I realize that sometimes I might jump the gun, but 2 out of 3 times I'm not jumping the gun. I'm getting a number that won't be there a week later because of the 2 offshores that go so fast right now.
Yeah, so that's important. Where does the draft play in? Because we were discussing the draft a little bit. Is this all kind of like a apex at the draft, and then once the draft happens, that's when you kind of really push the accelerator, or are you making season bets even before the draft?
I'm making some season bets before the draft. It's kind of a 3-part thing. Some before the draft, if available. Some right after the draft, because in reality, you say, oh, the draft's only going to have at best a low positive correlation to season wins. It's actually getting much higher.
Yeah.
If you look at the top 5 drafting teams, according to the way I rate them, and I write 65,000 words on these guys, 2 pages each team. If you look at the top 5 drafting teams and the bottom 5 drafting teams, it's like 7 or 8 out of 10 go according to plan, over and under. The third piece is actual schedule, which used to come out before the draft.
Yep.
I appreciated that because then I had 2 more weeks of downtime afterwards. Now you have it come out around the May 12th, May 15th or something like that, a Tuesday or Thursday. It takes me about 3 days to process that and to write 8 pages about that. And that's it. From May 18th to August to now. There's nothing I need to do. I have every data point. I have the trap games. I have, the schedule, which is crazy these days. How they're making 3 games in 10 days, 3 games in 11, more road Sunday games after road Monday games and stuff like that. Processing that all in, it's all ready to go, and the process is complete by May 15th, May 20th.
So here we are, present day. We have games on our TV, not here on this TV. Actually, no, we do have Raiders-Vikings here on this TV. Games all day long. The next 2 weeks, all preseason games. Are you a preseason bettor? Is that a learning process for you, or is that a market discovery process for you? I want to get involved. I want to see how things move and where things go.
Sanity's sake, not a preseason bettor. When there were 4 games, I used to do some first half and lines on the 3rd game of the season, which was a dress rehearsal, and then they had time off and stuff like that. But no, I used the preseason. Used to get a lot of data from 25, 30 teams. I get data from the preseason, who they're looking at, who they're picking up after the cut. If they start picking up 2 secondary members, 2 cornerbacks, that tells me that team's a little soft at cornerback. So I'm looking at that stuff. Might get information from 8 to 10 teams. Nothing from the Rams. They don't dress their starters and stuff like that. And then I'm writing during this time period. I
think that's the biggest takeaway that I've heard so far. So if you're watching this at home, if you're a new bettor, say this is the first time you're betting the NFL this year. This is your 2nd year betting the NFL. You don't have a lot of experience betting the NFL. Write a diary. I know that sounds weird and lame. I write a diary every day for other things, but obviously I write for gambling. I think writing is the most important way to cement things into your head. You don't realize it when you're watching something and you see it. We're such a visceral society. You watch it, you internalize it, and then you emote it. Write it down, because you'll forget it, and that feeling is fleeting. It's like a wave. You'll feel strongly about something, and then something else will come in, and that feeling about something else will recede. And it's important to, I think, crystallize your feelings by writing them down. That is, ask any therapist when you're having mental problems. They will tell you to start journaling. It's the exact same thing, and I think it is a very underutilized tool for a lot of gamblers in our society, because it's just not cool. It's not hip to sit there and write all day long, but I promise you, you will see results from it. Okay, so now we get to the regular season. And the regular season, I'm assuming for you, it looks relatively similar, right? It's a routine. Every week you kind of have this process that you go through. But during the regular season, it's very repeatable. There's not as many moving parts because you kind of get into that groove. What does a regular week look like for you? Take me Monday through Sunday.
So by Sunday afternoon, I'm watching the 3 games that are on the afternoon because they load up the morning. That's a different story, right? And I'm recording stats. I have a team sheet, and it's full of data. As a small writer, I can get more on a letter, as my mom used to say, than most people can get in an 8x11 page. So I'm writing these notes down, and I'm looking for patterns throughout the season. Oh, this team has allowed 10 sacks in the last 3 games. Or Josh Sweat is traded, Chase Young is traded at the deadline. All of a sudden, Washington gets no more sacks. So I'm looking at the data, I'm putting that down, but I'm not transferring to this year's data until after 4 games have been played. Never overreact to week 1. Oh my goodness, I'm terribly wrong. They beat the team 28-0, and the team's going to end up winning 3 games the rest of the year. In fact, if I've made notes on each game, which I have on my team sheets, I may have expected that underdog to win. So the most important thing that you could do is not overreact on week to week. And so I'm writing this stuff down. I'm making my odds. I've got my odds ready by Sunday night, Monday morning. And then I'm looking and saying, well, if it's off from my power ratings, because I'm adjusting power ratings too, that's part of my analysis, then I'm going to hit it now, or I'm going to wait, or I'm going to see if there's 2 or 3 different shops out there and make some comparisons. So you have to make a decision as to when you're going to play these games.
Yeah, I think that is becoming a big part of it. We talked to Las Vegas, Chris, Steve Fezzik. They're always confounded with when certain bettors make their claim into a market that during the regular season, the NFL market doesn't move as quickly as we get later on because the lines are pretty sharp. This guy's pretty sharp too. Ron Marmalefsky is going to come back with us on the other side of this break. We'll talk more about the NFL and how he handicaps on a week-to-week basis what I think is the best sport. More with Ron next here on VSIN. All right, we are back here on VSIN, and look at this. They were just celebrating for a brief moment here as Team USA pulling away from France in the gold medal game. Guess what? They're not going to cover because they just don't cover. But Team USA up 9 with 16 seconds to go. There is the live shot of Circa. It was very much rowdy a few moments ago. I think Steph Curry hit a 3 that really put this game away as Team USA will win the gold medal. But, hey, they were a $5 favorite. I would have expected them to win the gold medal. I don't think they've covered in the knockout round. That's kind of been the vibe for them. All right, we return to the NFL chat here with Ron Marmalefsky. Very excited to have him in studio. And, Ron, we were talking during the break. Of course, if you don't know Ron, check out his podcast because him and Las Vegas Chris do an unbelievable job of going through every game, every scenario, every situation. It's tedious work. It's not glamorous. It's not like gonna get like a million retweets because you made $1 million on some 10-leg parlay. But this is what handicapping is at its core. It's going through every single scenario, every single game, every single team, and trying to find where the sports books are wrong or where there is value and where there is some sort of inconsistency. So now that we're in the season, we had a chance to briefly go through your process before this break. Walk me through now. You wake up on Monday morning. You're ready to attack a new week. The lines have all been dropped. What is the process like for you as we get ready to march towards Sunday, which is game day?
It's obviously split between NFL and NCAA. And the NFL, especially early, doesn't take that much time. I'm reacting. I'm a box score reader because I want to know if a team was -3 turnovers, how did that affect the game? What happened there? How many points were scored off the turnovers? Would they have otherwise won with 0 turnovers? Is it a problem because of their quarterback? That kind of thing. So it's really still reading and digesting information at that particular time, looking to see if there's something that I can uncover that maybe somebody else hasn't yet factored into the line.
Yeah, I think being able to read a box score is a lost art because there are certain things that just don't show up in box scores. And you have to kind of just know what you're looking for in a sense. It's gotten a little bit easier these days with the advanced analytics. Where are you with the Pro Football Focus and some of the EPA and some of those advanced numbers that now sometimes get force-fed down our throats and we don't always know what they mean? But I do think they kind of help us gauge some of the performances where some of the counting stats don't.
I'm aware of them, but I use my own methodology because it's a 3-part process. It's really how a team matches up to another team. So I'm aware of which team will win the line of scrimmage, at least from my standpoint. Which team will have more success passing against this kind of defense? Which running back, which quarterback? Is it a scrambling type team? Is it not? I'm aware of the situation involved as far as situational handicapping, and I'm aware of the value because I've adjusted my power ratings. So I'm aware of that stuff, but
not for you.
It's not for me. It's at 40 years. I'm set, but I'm not set because I know the quarterback position alone has changed.
Yeah.
The kind of quarterbacks that are successful in the league now would never have been successful even 10 years ago. You can't put Anthony Richardson on a team with 11 college starts from the University of Florida and make him be successful in 2008, but you can now.
I always laugh and I say, if you took half of the players, like we had this debate about time, if this player would be good in this generation, if you took half of the players from the 80s and put them on a team today, they wouldn't even make the team. Like, I just think the game itself has evolved so much. It's always interesting to see which players, which teams kind of buck those trends. All right, so advanced analytics is not something you use. What about when we go week to week and the prop market? That has been something I know you have really dived into, especially the college prop market, which is kind of its own separate entity now. Might be going away. I hope it's not, because you're fantastic at it and it's really a great market. But the NFL prop market, relatively new, right? You were in this space long before the NFL props existed. Yeah. How have the props changed the way you look at these teams and betting them week to week?
I try to treat them as separate entities. However, there is a little crossover. If I'm looking at a game and I have 3 overs and 7 unders, and I have 7 unders on, all 6 of the 7 unders are on Team A, and 2 of the 3 overs are on Team B, I'm saying, why don't I like Team B in the game? So there is some of that that helps me or guides me and says, maybe I should take a second look at this. Now, it could be just one wide receiver or one guy getting a sack or whatever, which doesn't really impact the plus minus in terms of the straight betting. But there have been a couple of instances where I've said, I'm really top heavy in one direction, and I need to use that or be aware of that in the handicapping, because if I really think this is going to happen, that this person's not going to do anything, why am I not looking to bet against that side?
Has the prop market overtaken sides and totals for you in terms of allocation of your bankroll, but also how you view the overall betting markets every week? Do you look at the props? I know the props drop later, but are the props, I guess, a leading indicator? Like, if you're looking at all these prop numbers, like you said, and you're saying over on this guy, wow, I've got 4 or 5 overs on this team, would that get to a bet on a team just based off of your discovery of the prop market?
It's possible that would happen, but it's funny. I think the prop market now is going to cause me to have fewer prop bets this year than not. There's 2 or 3 reasons. Number one, the guys in DraftKings and FanDuel, they come out so early, and it's a more accepted market now. Sure. People are more doing it, so they're honing the numbers before us. People who want to use legal or sports books, or of course I'm in California, so nothing's legal, but that's a different story.
That's another story for another day. No whole hour on that.
It's tough, but some of the numbers are honed in already. There's also another thing where the books, the offshores especially, they're going to this prop builder kind of method, if you've seen that.
Parlays.
And what happens there is they're not using whole numbers anymore.
Yep.
And when they're not using whole numbers, like wide receiver, 4 catches, that was part of the that was my edge. To piggyback 4 over 3.5, get some value and so on. They're using 3.5 minus 112 plus, plus 112 minus 167.
Yeah, you can't win.
And that's not an exaggeration.
Can't win.
So they're killing the prop market. I have a feeling my strategy this year will change, and it'll be hone in on 3 or 4 games where I can really delve into it and try to get in earlier and ignore the other 12 that are on the market. I honestly think I'm going to be decreasing my prop market volume.
Interesting. And I guess this kind of leads me to the next question. Has betting gotten harder in the last 5 years? And I know it was legal before then, but really decriminalized federally. Do you think betting has become harder since that moment in 2018 and PASPA was repealed?
Yeah, when a guy like me who shouldn't be moving the market, I'm not in there in the fancy high roller. I'm comfortable with the money I'm betting. It's not going to be thousands of dollars or whatever. When a guy like me goes to a local place here and moves the line 20 cents because I wanted to make a max $300 bet. It's getting harder. It's getting harder. There are other reasons why it's getting harder. The transfer portal, the colleges, there's a lot of mess there. In the NFL, it doesn't necessarily have to get harder, but the books are making it harder. I know you've had conversations. Everybody's had conversations. The tax on this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Games of the year, minus 120 instead of minus 110. Seasoned handicappers, people who've done it for this long, no matter how much they're betting, they don't want to go into these markets where instead of hitting 52.38%, you have to hit 54 or you have to hit 55%, and your edge is being taken away artificially. So it is harder.
That's the one thing that, again, my generation and younger, really younger, I'm almost 40, and I have not seen the same stuff that Ron has seen throughout the course of his career, but I have experienced a change, a generational shift, I would say, in the last 5 years, where you now see the younger social media-driven generation approach betting from a very different way. Your generation approached it from profit, consistency, discipline, long-term. This new generation is how many bets can I win in the short amount of time, and how long can the ticket be, and how big can that one win be to outlay all the other losses. And I think that's the hardest thing that I like to preach when I go on these shows. You just have to understand the math is against you when you bet minus 120, minus 130 every single day. It's really hard. And when they start taking those away, even on markets that you expect to lay only 10 cents, now you're laying 15 cents, now you're laying 20 cents. It's impossible to win long term, and I just think that is the lesson that I think this newer gambling generation that is being thrust into the spotlight because of all the attention that we're getting is going to learn the hard way.
And they're going to learn the hard way when they say they have 3 or 4 or 5 good weeks. They have one bad week. It starts off bad, then they chase on Monday Night Football. If you do not have the discipline, especially in front of the computer when you're not handing over money across the ticket or whatever, if the younger generation, and there were older generation, there were peers of mine who didn't have the discipline that they had to get their money back before they paid the bookie, in a white Cadillac in back of a liquor store like some of us did in those days. If you don't have the discipline, watch the games and enjoy them.
That's 100%, and it's entertainment to a fault. But when you start trying to make money and you fail, if you continue to try to make money and fail, well, then it's not an endeavor anymore. You're just losing. All right, really good stuff. I want to transition to a little college football on the other side, and we'll try to get some opinions on some teams. But I think this conversation is way more fascinating as we have more with Ron on the other side here on VSIN. Hey, if you haven't heard, VSIN now proudly owned by Musburger Media. And to celebrate VSIN offering its lowest price ever, it is a special 3-year offer. And because of the overwhelming response, we are extending this offer. Sign up before Monday. Get 3 years, not weeks, not months, not days, years of VSIN Pro Access for just $350. That's a really good annual price there. It saves you 75% off the monthly rate. Become a VSIN Pro subscriber today. Instant access to everything we do, including for the next 3 years, all kinds of goodies. This deal, of course, extended to Monday, available both for new and current subscribers. And if you're an existing subscriber and would like to add 3 years to your account, please email us at subscribe@vsin.com. Go to VSIN right now. Check it out. All right, Ron Marmalefsky joining us here. This has been an awesome, insightful segment, and we're going to carry it over here to our final 30 minutes because, Ron, I think when we talk about NFL betting and prop betting, right, the prop market is a bridge, I think, to most bettors. Most people that have gotten into the gambling space over the last few years, fantasy football is kind of the catalyst, and we can kind of relate to that. This guy's going to play well. We're going over his receiving yards total. Like, that's a fantasy mindset. But a lot of other bettors have caught on there. The one market, though, that has gone relatively untouched, fresh powder, as I like to call it, has been the college football prop market, and that is something you specialize in. This market always kind of comes back to the forefront during bowl season. That's when I remember we had multiple conversations during this bowl season about this team and this player, but I think in general, and I hope it doesn't go away because of out-of-state regulations and all the, D1, Title IX, and basically any kind of regulation that NCAA is going to throw at you with the NIL to try to get these props off the market, but you've had a lot of success with college props over the years. Do you want to explain that process to me?
With the college props, all things aren't as created equal. They aren't the superstars that go in the NFL where the margin of error is slimmer. You have some teams that outweigh offensive line to defensive line, 30, 40, 50 pounds more if it's a service academy. So if you know the tendency that this team's going to run X amount of the time, or this coach is going to not sub when they're up 14, 15 or whatever, you can kind of get an idea of where they're going to go. If this guy's going to get 12 carries, how many yards is he going to get? Is this number properly priced or not? Is this team going to be behind and they're going to have to throw? And this team, while they're ranked high, maybe they don't have a strong pass defense, or they allow a lot of underneath catches. Can you get in with the under number of catches? Very good market to hit. But in the bowl season last year, I learned a lesson. 40 years, I learned a lesson.
Please enlighten us.
Yeah. When you opt out of bowl games, you change the dynamic of your team. If you're trying to bet a bowl prop and 4 of your offensive linemen have said, no, we're not playing in the bowl game, do not rely on your own research to go ahead and do that. And I took some hits in 3 or 4 bowl prop games because I was anticipating that, well, 2 or 3 guys aren't going to play. It's not going to matter. Well, they did matter, and I kind of learned a lesson saying, be careful. I got, when we got to the playoff games and championship game, we were good. But when we got to the Weed Eater Bowl or something like that, and Florida State didn't play their guys, and Notre Dame and Oregon State, none of them played. So do not really go after the bowl props in those games unless you got a sleeper guy who's going to get more carries that he never had. But otherwise, you're gambling.
Yeah, the bowl process has been unique. I think when I look at the bowl games, they were always one of my favorite parts of the season. And now I would say last year specifically, I noticed a big change in how the markets react. 2 years ago, it was such a shock to the system that we had whole teams opting out. I don't think the markets really knew how to react. I think last year, to your point, I think the sports books got smarter with kind of how they view the opt-outs, opt-ins, opt-heres, opt-there. I think it is probably the most difficult 2-week stretch to really wrap your arms around. But if the way that I always view those types of situations, if I'm at a disadvantage, the sportsbook's probably at somewhat of a disadvantage. And if I can just be ahead of the curve, you're going to be in the plus EV category. Easier said than done. A lot of extra work, a lot of extra diary writing and journal writing that goes into it. Yes. But I do think the bowl season and college football, the prop markets, the newer markets, right? Like when you see sports books unveil new markets, that has to be like the emoji with the heart eyes because it's new, it's fresh. Sometimes they don't know how to price it right, and you've got the notes, you've got the data, and you think you're going in the right direction. Yeah,
especially when sportsbooks who don't normally put them out. I mean, some of them, they put them out, they're used to it now, but there's always 2 or 3, that are trying it for the first time. They want to get up, they want to beef up their profit, or they want to get new markets in to attract attention. Yeah. And they're going to miss on some things. And that's excitable.
It's funny, they call it, like the sportsbook operators I know, especially the ones that work at the big shop, they call it product. They don't call it markets, they call it product. Right? We're buying something from them. They're selling it to us. So, sometimes they sell things better than others. Some things are wrapped in different packages. You go to the store, sometimes you buy this, brand over this brand because it looks better. It is always interesting how sportsbooks package things together, the tabs, all the different ways that you can bet. I have nights, some Friday nights, Saturday nights. This is how cool of a guy I am. I'll just sit on my couch with my dog, and I will literally scroll through every single market on a specific sport just to make sure I didn't miss a new market that just got thrown up over the last week that's like a brand new way. Because now there's so many ways that you can bet on things. You can bet on, for example, in baseball, they have these new markets this year where you can bet on the most hits and go like a matchup. Like this player or this player who has more hits. Here's something that our pal Steve Fezzik loves to do that I can't wrap my head around. Runs, hits, and errors for a team. That has been a traditional market that I didn't even know existed until very recently when Steve turned me onto it. Of all the ways that you've bet on something, there's probably a new way that you're not even thinking of, and the books have figured it out, and there's product on their site. So that being said, what do you think is your best, let's say, again, first season betting the NFL this year. What is the best number one piece of advice you would give to a new bettor cracking open their first NFL beer this year?
The first thing is get a handle on the teams that you think you know, and there are always teams that you may not know, and be careful about that. Last year, all the writing, all these thousands of words I wrote, 2 teams, Indianapolis and Cleveland, confused me. And I said, leave them alone. Let's go with some teams that I know. Let's let the data, especially 4 weeks worth of data, play out. So I'd say, don't think that you're going to be an expert on 32 teams. Nobody's an expert that way. If you're betting college and you got 60 lines, the odds makers are going to be right on more lines than I'm going to be right on, even with my power ratings. But I don't have to bet all 60 games.
Yep.
So go to a strength. They always say go to one conference, figure out one conference first. I wouldn't recommend the MAC, by the way, but but go to one conference that you think well, that's traditional or whatever. I mean, if we're shooting the clock back 40 years, I'd say just stick to the Ivy League. Run, pass, punt. That was where my foundation started.
Okay.
How to figure out the line of scrimmage, what edge to give to run data. And a little hidden gem here is that I compute running stats differently than others. I take sacks out of the equation for college, and I take kneel downs out, and you have to be careful because sometimes there was a bad snap on a punt, and it's recorded minus 25 yards. I take that out of the equation. It changes the numbers. So if you have that foundation where you have this conference or you have the NFL, you have 4 or 5 teams you follow. The other thing I would say, digressing a little bit, is back test. Go back. Before I even started putting power ratings together, I went to the library back then and I got data and I tested the power ratings for 3 consecutive years before I started moving and trusting my own power ratings. So I wanted to make sure I had that foundation. Wherever you start, have a foundation.
Have a process, have a plan, be able to repeat that plan. I always say it's like a diet. If your diet has all these crazy, different quirks and nuance, you have to cook all this crazy food, buy all this food, you're probably going to fail. Simple, repeatable, I think is the hardest part, is to be able to repeat your process week in and week out and not deviate from it too much. How long into the season will you throw out your preseason ratings? 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Usually 4 weeks, but the 4th week I will straddle the data. I'll compare it, saying that the 4th week, what if I didn't use last year's data? What if I did? Especially for college. I'm in college. You could have USC and UCLA could be playing. I think 2 years ago they played 3 teams nobody's ever heard of. And USC, was playing LSU at the start of the season and so on and so forth. You can't do it on 3 games in college, even though you're saying, but then there's only going to be 8 games left. You cannot really throw things out until after 4 weeks because the numbers are just going to change drastically when you add in week 3 to week 4.
Yeah, I've talked to some pros that say 2 weeks. I think that's probably the more patient approach, is to wait 4 weeks, to wait a month. But it's quick. I mean, it's quick. You do a month's worth of work in the offseason, and then boom, 3-4 weeks later, you're already on to the next. Ron Marmalefsky, unbelievable insight and advice. If you don't follow him on X, you need to do it right now at Ron A Sports, and he is going to be with us all season long. Probably going to be back on the network at some point and continue to give you that great insight and advice. We appreciate the time, Ron.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it a lot.
Awesome stuff. We'll come back, wrap up the show on the other side here on VSIN Live. That's that.